There is a kind of silence that only exists near the poles. You can hear it tucked in the edges of the recordings from Helios 3. It is not the absence of sound, but a pressure of it, as though the world were wrapped in something thick and cold and unwilling to carry the human voice very far. Even when the personnel at the station speak directly into their recorders, you can sense the distance between them and everything else alive. Helios 3 was not a famous station. By the time it blinked off the network, it was one more remote node in a climate monitoring lattice that spanned oceans and continents. 8 modular units half sunk into permafrost, their metal seams packed with foam and ice, powered by a pair of aging generators and a hesitant sun. It did not host any experimental reactors or classified gateways or weapon platforms. It existed to watch the sky, the wind, and the long, slow dying of the ancient ice. 8 people staffed it. That number appears everywhere in the recovered material. 8 bunks, 8 survival suits, tagged and hung in the airlock like dormant carapaces. 8 names on the manifest, printed and laminated and taped above the central workstation. 8 entries in the biometric database, 8 toothbrushes in a plastic cup by the bathroom sink, and, most obsessively, 8 in the station's safety logs. Helios 3 maintained a strict headcount protocol, once at 0800 and once at 2000 hours. The entire crew were to present themselves in the common room for a formal tally. The designated duty officer would confirm each person visually, check them against a printed manifest, and mark them present in a digital form on the central system. That same tally was then transcribed by hand into a physical ledger stored in a metal box bolted to the wall. The redundancy was not bureaucratic fussiness. In that environment, survival depended less on equipment than on the certainty that no one had wandered off into the white alone. The headcount was ritual, reassurance, and cage all at once. For 90 consecutive days, the system worked as intended. I have read every one of those entries. Morning and evening, the duty officer records 8 present, none absent, none excused. The handwriting varies as different people take the watch, but the content does not. There are occasional notes about sluggish attendance, complaints about someone oversleeping, but the result is always the same. 8 present. On day 91 at 2000 hours, the pattern breaks. In the digital log, the evening headcount entry reads, 2000 hours, headcount complete, 9 personnel present, no discrepancies, logged by J. Price. In the physical ledger for that same check, the same datum has been written in neat, practiced script. 9 personnel accounted for, none missing. Below that summary, 8 names from the manifest are copied out in order. Each has a mark beside it indicating presence. There is a 9th line beneath them, left blank. No name, no mark, no note. The handwriting of the summary and the copied names matches that of earlier entries by the station's data analyst and network systems specialist, Jonah Price. Pressure, slant, letter spacing, all consistent. There is no sign of hesitation or correction. Several hours later, Jonah records a personal log in which he insists that he never wrote 9. The materials from Helios 3 arrived in Vault 13 as a partial and damaged set. System images from the central computer, scans of the ledger pages, selected personal logs, and a fragmentary dump of security camera footage from the last weeks of the station's operation. Much of it is corrupted, some of it is missing entirely. What remains is enough to draw an outline around the events, but not enough to fill every gap. I have spent more nights than I care to admit moving between those files, pausing video to compare it to written logs, rewinding audio to match an offhand comment to a blurred movement at the edge of a frame, tracing again and again the moment when a station that housed 8 people began to record 9. The figure that appears in their cameras after day 91 never resolves fully. It lingers at thresholds, in reflections, in the softened corners of the image where compression smears detail. And yet, when I chart its movements across time, the pattern it follows is disturbingly familiar. Vault 22, whose holdings I am not strictly authorized to reference, includes a field description of a creature catalogued years earlier under a provisional designation and then sealed in a restricted appendix. The similarities between that description and the behavior of Helios 3's 9th passenger are not subtle. I will tell you what happened on that station as far as the files allow me to know. But understand this, the first thing that changed was not a scream or a bang or a missing body. It was a number in a logbook written in a hand that did not remember writing it. If you approach the story of Helios 3 chronologically, the first 80 or so days are almost aggressively dull. The station lead, Dr. Anika Sorensen, maintained a meticulous operations log. Her daily entries, preserved in the central system, are an exercise in discipline. Weather readings, generator output, fuel consumption, schedule adherence, minor interpersonal tensions, all are noted with a cool, dry precision. On day 12, she writes, "Morale within acceptable parameters. Work progressing slightly ahead of schedule. Minor complaints regarding sleep disruption due to generator noise. Will consider implementing staggered shifts. All 8 personnel present and accounted for at both headcounts." She ends many entries with some variation of that last sentence. Sometimes it is all 8 accounted for. Sometimes headcount nominal 8. It reads like a mantra, a box that must be ticked before the day can be put away. The personal logs add texture to that skeleton. Dr. Mei Zhang, the glaciologist, speaks softly into her recorder, her voice almost swallowed by the hum of the ventilation system. She talks about ice cores and trapped bubbles of ancient air, about climate models and feedback loops, about how very strange it is to hold a cylinder of frozen time in her hands while knowing that the world which produced it is gone. Luis Ortega, the meteorological technician, is livelier. His logs veer from commentary on pressure fronts to complaints about coffee, boredom, and the way cold seems to seep into bones and thoughts alike. It is like living in the inside of a refrigerator that forgot what warmth was, he says on day 21. 8 of us rattling around in here like leftovers. Pavel Morozov, the mechanical engineer, does not make logs willingly. His few entries are short and grudging, forced by protocol. He reports generator maintenance, minor failures in the air handling units, and the discovery of a hairline crack in a fuel line, which he repairs before anyone else notices. Tessa Kincaid, the quartermaster and cook, records sporadically, usually late at night in the mess when she believes everyone else is asleep. Her logs have the tone of someone writing letters never intended to be sent. She describes meals, small victories in stretching supplies, little makeshift celebrations on days that would be holidays back home. I keep counting plates, she admits in one entry. 8 mugs, 8 bowls, 8 sets of cutlery. It is stupid, but if I ever come out here and there are 9, I think I will just walk outside and let the wind take me. The others speak less often. Malik Farah, the general technician, leaves a scattering of brief updates on electrical systems and antenna integrity. Dr. Elise Hart, the medical officer, keeps mostly to structured clinical notes. Weight fluctuations, sleep patterns, minor injuries, the onset of seasonal affective symptoms. And then there is Jonah Price. His early logs are sparse, little more than protocol compliance. Helios 3, personal log Price day 5, network stable. No anomalies in uplink. Data transfer window executed on schedule. 8 personnel present at both headcounts. Nothing further. He speaks clearly, but his tone is disengaged, as if his mind is elsewhere. Only later does he begin to linger on the headcounts, at first humorously, then with a note of irritation. On day 29, I have built a script that cross-checks the headcount entries against the manifest and the biometric logs. Not because I expect anything interesting to happen, but because if I have to hear Anika recite 8 present one more time, I will start dreaming in integers. He laughs when he says it. There is no awareness yet of how tightly that number has wrapped itself around their lives. The security camera footage from the early weeks supports this sense of routine. In the common room, the crew move in and out with predictable regularity. Morning. Bleary faces, coffee cups, the ritual scroll of tablets showing weather reports and data summaries. Evening. The slow disintegration of focus into card games, quiet reading, or the numb stare of someone trying to forget how far away the rest of humanity is. The camera in the main corridor captures the same boots crossing the same stretch of floor dozens of times a day. There are only a few angles. Airlock interior, main corridor, common room, generator room entrance, medical bay door. Helios 3 had neither the budget nor the inclination for intrusive surveillance. For the first 2 months, nothing on those feeds cannot be accounted for by the 8 names on the manifest. The 91-day timeline as we know it begins to diverge around day 85. The first hint is small, almost laughably so. Jonah notes in a personal log, Day 85, minor annoyance. My headcount validation script threw a warning at 1600 hours. There should not even be a head count at 1600. Checked the database. No records inserted out of schedule. Might be a timer bug or someone messing with it. Will investigate when I care more. When I compare this with the system logs, I can see what he means. At exactly 1603 seconds system time, the head count table receives an attempted write. The operation fails. The reason: incomplete transaction. No data is stored. A fraction of a second later, the script logs a warning. Unexpected write operation to headcount table outside scheduled window. No commit. Check for tampering. There is no indication which terminal initiated it. The trace fields are blank. Normally, that would not be possible. Helios 3 operated on a closed, tightly controlled network. Every console was assigned, every login tracked. For a write operation to be associated with no source at all suggests either a deeper level of system compromise or a corruption in the logs themselves. At the time, Jonah shrugs it off. There is an evening head count on day 85, as usual. In the digital log at 2000 hours, someone, Jonah, based on the ID, enters. Head count normal, 8 personnel present. The physical ledger shows the same, 8 names, 8 marks, no anomalies. The footage of that head count is, in its broad strokes, unsurprising. The common room camera shows the crew gathering, some more promptly than others. Anika stands by the console with the manifest. Tessa leans against the counter, mug in hand. Malik fidgets with a stim toy. Luis slumps in a chair, half asleep. May, Elise, Pavel, and Jonah take up their habitual positions. Anika calls their names one by one. Each raises a hand or responds with a wordless sound. Her voice is flat, practiced. If you watch that footage once, you will not notice anything. If you watch it 5 times, pausing on each frame, and then compare it to later head counts, you might notice the way certain bodies overlap at strange intervals. A shoulder that seems to pass through a shadow with less resistance than it should. The hint of an extra obstruction in the crowding around the table. It is nothing you could prove from that single recording. The compression artifacts and low frame rate would give any analyst plausible deniability. But the attempted unscheduled write to the head count table sits there in the system log just a few hours earlier, like a cough in a quiet room. By day 88, the system has tried to change itself twice more. Jonah's log for that day, which I quoted in part before, is longer than most. He begins, as usual, with network status. Helios 3, personal log, price day 88. Uplink static but functional. Data transfer delay increasing, probably atmospheric interference. Nothing alarming yet. He pauses. There is the sound of something tapping, likely his fingers on the bunk frame. Had another weird blip with the head count script. It threw a mismatch warning this morning right before 08 head count said tally exceeds manifest. Checked the form. No one had filled it yet. table was empty. Only way it should be able to produce that warning is if someone submitted a count higher than 8, which no one did. He laughs, but it is strained. I checked the table manually. 8 entries, all as expected. Maybe I misread the error, maybe I need sleep. We'll add it to the list of things I will care about when we are back in a place where you can walk in a straight line for more than 20 meters. The system logs confirm his story, up to a point. At 07:59 and 52 seconds, there is an incoming value to the headcount script, a provisional tally of 9. The script flags it as inconsistent with the manifest and discards it. The form at the console itself remains untouched until the official check at 0800, when Jonah, standing at the common room terminal, taps in 8, sees the green confirmation, and logs it without comment. No one present appears to notice that for 8 seconds their own system believed that there were 9 of them. The evening head count on day 88 is not recorded in full. The relevant segment of the common room camera feed is missing, replaced with a block of corrupt data. The system log insists a recording took place. The file size is consistent with the 10-minute clip. What survives is 34 seconds of flickering video at the start, followed by digital snow. Those 34 seconds are unsatisfying. The camera shows the common room door, the table, a partial view of the kitchenette. People are entering the frame one by one. The angle is such that you do not see everyone at once. There is a blur near the left edge of the frame, close to where the corridor opens. It might be someone's shoulder failing to resolve properly as they pass. It might be an artifact of the corruption that eats the rest of the recording. It might be something else. I have watched those 34 seconds until the pixels seem to crawl inside my eyes. I have mapped every known crew member's position, frame by frame, for those moments. Based on their previous habits and later movements, there is an overlap in which there appears to be one more body in the room than there should be, occupying a narrow slice of space between Malik and Tessa, slightly behind them. No face is visible, no hand. The shape is implied by what it blocks. What matters, perhaps, is not that I can see it now, with all the time and tools at my disposal, but that they did not see it then. On day 90, Jonah leaves a shorter log. Price, day 90. No network anomalies. Scripts running quietly for once. Head counts nominal. 8 souls in the freezer. He sounds tired. There is an edge of something like relief when he says, scripts running quietly, as if the absence of further warnings has lulled him back into complacency. The system does not entirely agree with his assessment. There is no attempted unscheduled write to the head count table on day 90, no provisional tally of 9, no mismatch. The script sleeps. Instead, something else happens. At exactly 1800 hours, the biometric tracking system, which periodically pings the crew's wearable tags to confirm presence within the safe zone, registers 9 active signals. The record lasts for 3 seconds. Then one of the signals, listed under no name, assigned no ID, is dropped. The count returns to 8. The anomaly is logged as a transient hardware glitch and automatically dismissed by the monitoring demon. No alert is issued to any human operator. When I align that timestamp with the corridor camera feed, I find that, at those 3 seconds, the only visible movement is May walking from the lab toward the common room, her tablet held up before her face. Behind her, for a single frame, the camera struggles to decide how many legs are hitting the floor. By the time day 91 begins, the system, which is designed only to count and compare, has already, more than once, experienced the presence of something its creators did not intend it to recognize. The humans at Helios 3 have not. Their logs for that morning are ordinary. Nika complains, half joking, about the monotony of the data. Luis notes an interesting but ultimately non-remarkable pressure shift. Elise records an uptick in insomnia among the crew, which she attributes to cumulative stress and extended darkness. Tessa mentions that the powdered eggs are almost gone. At 0800, they gather, as they always do, in the common room. The footage from that head count is intact. I have watched it again and again, not because it is dramatic, but because, by all available records, this is the last time that Helios 3 officially agrees it contains only 8 people. They file in. They take their places. Annika stands at the console, manifest displayed. She calls each name. Each person responds. 8 acknowledgements, 8 marks on the paper, 8 keystrokes on the digital form. Head count complete, she says. 8 personnel present. Jonah, standing beside her, glances at the display, confirms the green status icon, and clicks the button to commit the entry. For several seconds after that, no one leaves. They stand there, some sipping coffee, some leaning on the backs of chairs, 2 of them arguing quietly about whether they can justify adjusting the sampling schedule. In the far right of the frame, near the doorway, there is a thin strip of space where no one stands, a vertical slice of air between Malik's shoulder and the wall. The pixels in that space move slightly slower than those around them. You would never notice if you did not know to look. Even when you do, you can convince yourself you are imagining it. The system, for its part, is satisfied. 8 present, 8 expected. All is well. It is not until 2000 hours that the station's own records admit, for the first time, that there are 9. In the digital log, the evening head count appears as I described earlier. 2000 hours, head count complete, 9 personnel present, no discrepancies, logged by J. Price. There is no record of an error, no indication that the system objected to the tally. The value 9 sits there, accepted, as though it had always been a valid answer. The footage from that head count is incomplete. The first minute is missing. When the recording begins, the crew are already assembled. Anika is already at the console. Jonah stands beside her. The manifest is open. We hear the tail end of the roll call. Farah. Here, Malik says. Kincaid. Yeah, Tessa replies. Price. Right here. Annika's voice is steady as she concludes. All present. 9 personnel. The room is quiet for a heartbeat too long. No one corrects her. No one asks who the ninth is. If you freeze that frame, you can count the visible bodies. You will find, as I have, that there are only 8 discernible forms in the camera's field of view. And yet, when Anika steps aside to allow Jonah access to the console, he does not hesitate. He leans forward, taps the keys, and commits the number 9 to the law. Hours later, in his personal recorder, in the dry creak of his bunk, he will insist that he has no memory of doing so. That is where the story of Helios 3 truly begins. With a number that does not match the visible world, entered without objection, and a blank line in a ledger that acknowledges someone who officially is there and yet will never be named. The files from day 92 onward show a station subtly and then rapidly coming apart. I do not mean in any theatrical sense. No alarms, no fires, no breaches in the hull. The decline begins in the small moments, the soft places where human perception grows thin. It is the erosion of certainty, not the eruption of chaos, that defines the descent of Helios 3. For that reason, the first signs appear not in the security footage, but in the personal logs. The logs always reveal the cracks before the images do. The earliest entry from day 92 belongs to Dr. Elise Hart, the medical officer. Recorded at 0600 hours, her voice is rough, as if she has been awake far too long. Medical log, Hart 92. Sleep disturbances increasing among the team. 3 reports of vivid dreams. Ortega claims he heard someone walking in the corridor outside his room at approximately 0320. No one else was awake at the time, according to the access logs. Probably just the ventilation system. Will advise rest and hydration. All 8, she pauses. All 8 accounted for. Even in the audio, her hesitation is perceptible. She corrects herself without correcting anything. She does not acknowledge the previous day's anomalous tally. She simply reasserts the familiar number. I have performed waveform analysis on that pause. Her breath catches ever so slightly. It is the earliest physiological sign that Elise has begun to sense the station's distortion, though she does not articulate it. Later that morning, Jonah logs a short, irritable entry. Price 92. Reviewed last night's headcount log. I didn't write that. I know my handwriting, but I didn't write that. I asked Annika if she remembered calling 9. She said she must have misspoken. I don't buy it. Something's off. He exhales sharply. The microphone picks up fabric creaking. He is likely sitting on the edge of his bunk, checking system logs for tampering. If someone is screwing with the head count table as a joke, he trails off. No, nobody here has the time or patience for that. He ends the log there. His system audit from that morning still surveys. According to the recovered data, the station's central computer shows no signs of external intrusion. All checksum values match. No unexpected processes are running. The head count table has no unusual permissions or shadow entries. In fact, the system appears almost aggressively normal. Too normal. When a system misbehaves and leaves no trace whatsoever, that is often more suspicious than if it had left a trail of errors behind. The security camera footage from day 92 is comparatively uneventful at first. The crew move stiffly, perhaps tired, perhaps unsettled. They speak little. At 1400 hours, the corridor camera captures May walking toward the lab, her tablet in hand. Behind her, for exactly 3 frames, a blurred shape follows at her pace, as though attached to her shadow. When she turns to open the lab door, the shape collapses into the noise of the image. I have isolated and enhanced those frames. There is no definable contour, no face, no limb, nothing that any conventional analyst would classify as a figure. And yet the motion vector field in that region of the image behaves as if a moving object were present, one that the compression algorithm cannot cleanly resolve. The object's movement mirrors May's stride exactly, offset by roughly half a meter behind her, slightly to the left, an important detail when compared later to the Vault 22 field notes. The day continues without overt incident until the evening headcount at 2000 hours. The recovered footage is jittery with several dropped frames, but it is intact enough to reconstruct the scene. The crew gather in the common room more sluggishly than usual. Their postures are defensive, unconsciously closed. Tessa stands near the kitchenette, arms crossed. Malik chews his fingernails. Pavel stares fixedly at the floor. Anika begins the roll call. Sorensen, she says. Present. Zhang, here. Ortega. Morozov. Present. Farah. Yeah. Kincaid. Here. Hart. Present. She hesitates before saying the final name on the manifest. Price. Here, Jonah says. She looks at the console. Her eyes flick to the list. I have zoomed in on her face frame by frame. There is strain there, something she is refusing to acknowledge. Then she speaks the sentence that shatters the station's shared reality. All present. 9 personnel. There is no reaction at all from the others, no confusion, no correction. They stand as if nothing unusual has been said. Jonah steps forward and commits the entry without a flicker of doubt. But when he logs his thoughts just 50 minutes later, he is adamant. Price 92. I didn't say 9, I didn't type 9, but the log shows 9. The video, if this damn camera wasn't so grainy, I'd swear it was fake. I remember 8, I always remember 8. He inhales sharply. I don't know what's happening. The handwritten ledger entry for the evening head count is stranger still. The summary line in Annika's handwriting reads, 9 personnel accounted for. Below it, the 8 manifest names are written in their usual order, each marked present. Underneath them, the 9th line, again left blank, is nonetheless followed by a distinct present mark. A check, a stroke of pen, indicating someone who has no name. I examined the ink density and stroke order. It is a deliberate mark. Whoever wrote that check did so consciously, not automatically. It is not a smudge or a stray movement. Someone at Helios 3 believed, at least in that moment, that there was a ninth person standing before them. The problem is that no one remembered believing it. The next morning, day 93, the behavior changes more dramatically. Luis Ortega's personal log begins with a trembling whisper. "I didn't dream it. I know I didn't dream it. Someone knocked on my door last night." He swallows audibly. I asked who it was. No answer, just the sound of someone breathing, right on the other side. He pauses. When I opened it, nobody was there. Corridor was empty, but the floor was wet, like someone had just come in from outside. He ends the recording abruptly. The corridor camera from that night, time-stamped at 0300 hours, shows something else. The motion detector flags activity near Ortega's door, but the camera fails to resolve any figure. For 29 seconds, the image warps slightly at the edges, as though the metadata describing the scene can no longer fully account for its contents. When Ortega opens the door, the distortion vanishes. There are two small puddles in the corridor, irregular, glistening faintly. The internal temperature was stable. No crew member should have tracked melting ice indoors at that hour. The puddles evaporate within 3 minutes. The camera quality is too poor to determine whether they were water, slush, or something else. At 0800 hours, the morning headcount proceeds as always. 8 people respond to their names. 8 marks are made. But when Jonah commits the entry, the system records 9. The footage shows him tap the correct input, 8. Yet the log file shows 9. Between key press and commit, the value changes. He does not notice. Later, when he sees the discrepancy, he is furious. His personal log from mid-afternoon captures both anger and fear. This is impossible. Even if someone changes the table after the fact, the log should show the modification. There's nothing, no edits, no writes. It's like the system believes 9 the way it believes the sky is above us. It's just a condition of the environment. He pauses. I don't remember standing next to anyone extra. None of us do. So why does the system? By day 94, the crew are no longer sleeping properly. Elise's medical notes grow more frantic. Insomnia escalating. Reports of hearing footsteps in unoccupied corridors. Ortega and May both claim to have seen someone entering the common room ahead of them, but no one was present when they arrived. No signs of hallucination in standard cognitive tests. We'll continue monitoring. Meanwhile, the generator room camera captures the most unambiguous anomaly yet. At 1340 hours, Pavel enters the generator room carrying a tool bag. He sets it on a bench and removes a wrench. For approximately 6 seconds, he stands still, staring past the camera toward the far corner of the room. He whispers something, but the microphone does not catch it. Then, for 3 frames, the camera registers a second thermal outline 4 feet behind him. Not a full form, not a silhouette. A heat signature shaped like a body but subtly elongated, as though the machine is struggling to reconcile 2 incompatible thermal patterns. The signature vanishes abruptly when Pavel turns. A moment later, he shivers violently and drops his wrench. He makes no log entry about this. He never mentions it aloud, but when I cross-reference footage, there is a clear pattern. Pavel begins to avoid being alone. He shadows others more closely than before. He lingers in the common room long after finishing meals. His posture tightens when walking past reflective surfaces, as if he is afraid of glimpsing something beside him. It is also on day 94 that the first direct contradiction between footage and written logs appears. At 1700 hours, Tessa enters the common room. She moves to the counter, removes a mug from the rack, and begins pouring hot water. Her back is to the camera. A second figure appears near her, very close. Too close for another person to move that quietly without startling her. Its presence is detectable not by form, but by occlusion. A segment of the wall becomes dimmer, shaped as though a person-sized object stands between the wall and the camera. The distortion flickers, as though the figure's boundary is unstable. Tessa does not react. She stirs her drink. She leaves. Seconds after she exits the frame, the distortion moves, gliding, almost drifting, toward the doorway she used. 2 minutes later, she makes a personal log. Mess hall's freezing today. Feels like someone left the airlock open, probably the vent. She laughs softly. Or maybe the place just hates me. She does not mention anyone being there with her. The handwritten ledger entry for the evening head count on day 94 is the first to show subtle hesitation in script. The summary reads, 9 personnel present, but the pressure of the pen is uneven. The letters are shakier. The stroke of the numeral 9 digs slightly into the paper, as though the writer pressed harder than intended. The system log shows no anomalies beyond the expected. The tally is committed as 9. I note that on this day, for the first time, no crew member logs the number 8 in their personal entries. They do not mention the number at all. It is as if they are unconsciously avoiding it. Jonah, by contrast, leans into his fear. Price 94. It's happening when I'm not paying attention. The system thinks 9. Annika thinks 9, or at least she says 9. But none of us remember 9. None of us can name 9. He exhales shakily. I tried to write out the crew list from memory. I got all 8. I stopped. My hand, I don't know how to explain it. It kept drifting, like it wanted to write another name, like it expected one. He crumples the paper, one of the few moments of audible aggression in his recordings. It doesn't matter. Tomorrow I'm shutting down the headcount script and rewriting it from scratch. He never gets the chance. Because that night the airlock camera records something the station was not meant to withstand. At 0223, the airlock exterior sensor detects motion. The exterior lights flicker on. The camera activates. There is no blizzard, no wind, no staff scheduled for external tasks. And yet the pressure sensor on the outer door registers weight, something pressing lightly against it. Not enough to open it, not enough to trigger an alarm, just enough to suggest presence. The camera shows only darkness, a darkness with a shape, a slight indentation in the snow, something standing there, unmoving for nearly 11 seconds. Then the pressure lifts. The snow rises subtly, as if the weight were drawn upward rather than stepping back. The entity does not leave tracks. The inner door pressure sensor inside the lock registers no anomaly. No air transfer occurs. No breach. But 3 minutes later, the corridor camera outside the airlock shows the now familiar faint distortion trailing along the wall, moving toward the crew quarters. It passes directly beneath a ceiling lamp, which dims for exactly 1 second. The lamp returns to full brightness once the distortion is gone. Day 95 begins with 4 crew members reporting headaches, 2 reporting nausea, and 1, May, declining to fill out her morning health survey entirely. Instead, May's personal log begins with a whispered confession. "There were 9 this morning. I know there were 9. I counted them when we sat down for breakfast. There were 9 plates on the table. I know what I saw." She inhales sharply. "But when I blinked, there were 8 again." She ends the log abruptly, as though frightened by her own words. The breakfast footage confirms at least part of her story. For a 6-second interval, 9 plates are visible on the table. The camera records 9 distinct circular objects arranged around it. Their shadows are correct. Their positions make spatial sense. At the 7th second, a single dropped frame occurs. When the image returns, there are 8 plates. No one reacts. The table never moves. The missing plate does not slide, vanish, or blur. It simply ceases to be represented in the data. The compression between frames erases it as if it never existed. This is the first time the world itself, not just the crew's perception or the digital logs, appears to rewrite its own contents. At 0800, the morning headcount is held. Only 7 crew members respond. Luis does not appear. He is not in the bathrooms, not in his bunk, not in the lab. The footage from the early morning shows him entering the corridor at 0522, stumbling slightly, rubbing his eyes. He walks toward the common room. At 0523, the distortion appears behind him. At 0523 and 2 seconds, the distortion overlays him for less than half a second. At 0523 and 3 seconds, Luis Ortega is gone. Not fallen, not dragged, not screaming. Gone. The camera shows the empty corridor where he had been standing a heartbeat earlier. The distortion lingers for another 21 frames, then glides out of view. There is one more detail, the most chilling in my assessment. The biometric system, the same one that previously registered 9 signals, continues to read Ortega's tag for another 2 hours, moving as though he were still within the station. This is impossible. Biometric tags are physical devices attached to uniforms. They cannot transmit from nowhere, unless, of course, something else is carrying them. The morning head count logs 9, but the footage shows only 7 people. When confronted with the absence, the crew panic. Pavel becomes loud, erratic. Tessa begins sobbing. May tries to insist Luis was at breakfast. Elise tries to restore order. Anika stares at the manifest as though numbers alone can anchor reality. Jonah attempts to override the headcount script. The system denies his commands. He grows frantic, slamming keys. The camera records him typing an 8. The system commits a 9. Later, in his private log, the system isn't broken, it isn't glitching. It's seeing something we're not. It's seeing something real. It thinks there are 9, so it records 9, and now it's pulling us toward 9. He breathes, shaky and shallow. I think it's counting something that's not us. He ends the recording abruptly when a sound, something like slow, heavy breathing, echoes faintly in the background. At 1200 hours, the common room camera records the 9th presence directly interacting with the physical environment. Pavel is sitting alone, head in hands. Behind him, a mug on the counter shifts 2 inches to the left. Not slides, not drags. It moves in a single stuttering jump, as though the camera skipped forward. But the timestamp shows no missing frames. The mug's trajectory implies contact from something with mass. Pavel does not react. Anika enters moments later and nearly steps into the space where the distortion stands. She shivers violently, as though struck by a sudden chill. The distortion fades. By day 96, the crew begin making plans to leave. Their supply drop is not due for another 3 weeks. The weather is hostile. The ice shelf near their location is unstable. Yet every instinct tells them they must get out. Their discussion is recorded partly in personal logs, partly in the common room footage. Pavel: "We can't stay here. Whatever it is, it's in the walls." Tessa: "We can seal ourselves in the generator room, block the doors." May: No, it's not coming through the doors. It doesn't need doors." Jonah: "The system thinks 9, and now we're becoming 9. The camera shows Elise trying to intervene, urging calm, insisting they cannot risk fleeing into the Arctic without preparation. She is interrupted by a sudden loud clang from the corridor. The distortion appears in the doorway. This time there is no attempt by the camera to hide it. The outline is unmistakable, humanoid, elongated, its proportions subtly wrong. The head too high, the arms too long, the gait like an imitation of walking performed by something unfamiliar with joints. It does not enter the common room, but it turns toward them, and when it does, the image pixelates so violently that the entire screen becomes a field of geometric noise for several seconds. When the image recovers, the doorway is empty. The crew scatter. Logs become frantic, incoherent, filled with conflicting memories and denials. It is during this period that Annika's logs begin aligning with the creature described in Vault 22. She describes a figure that does not reflect light correctly, the sense of someone walking behind you, even in silence, a presence that stands at thresholds but does not cross, except when unobserved, a pattern of behavior resembling companion mimicry. Her final entry for day 96 ends with, "It stands just beyond where we can look. It stands where the cameras look. It stands where the numbers look. She does not record anything further for 12 hours. By day 97, there are only 6 people left in the footage. The headcount log records 9 present. The handwritten ledger shows 8 names checked, 1 blank line checked, and a second blank line drawn beneath it, faint and trembling. Jonah, in his final, stable log. We didn't lose people. We didn't miscount. It's not adding us. It's replacing us, one by one, until the 9 aren't us at all. He stops. You don't understand. 9 is just the shape it needs. 9 is just the number that fits in the system. The count isn't rising. The count is converging. The rest of his whisper is nearly inaudible. It learned us. It learned how to stand where we stand. It learned how to be counted. By this point, the distortion is visible in nearly every camera angle, sometimes multiple times per hour. It moves more fluidly now, less like a glitch and more like something the camera reluctantly acknowledges. The remaining crew gather in the common room one last time. Anika. Helios 3 is compromised. May. We can't go outside, it'll be waiting. Tessa. It's already inside. Pavel. It has been inside. Jonah. We have to shut down the system. Stop it from knowing us. Elise. It already knows us. For a moment they are silent, then the lights flicker. The distortion forms in the center of the room, not at the edges, not behind them, in the center. It stands taller than any of them. The proportions are closer to human now, sickeningly so, as if it is refining itself. The footage corrupts heavily. Frames stutter. The audio warps, stretching their screams into metallic distortions. When the video stabilizes, the room is empty. The system records 9 present. The biometric system reads 9 active signals. The crew manifest is unchanged, but the handwritten ledger for that evening contains 9 check marks, next to every name, including Ortega, who had not been seen for 2 days. By day 98, the cameras record only the distortion, moving through corridors with unsettling confidence, pausing at cameras as if assessing them. At 0800 hours, the morning headcount log appears, as usual, 9 present. Even though no humans remain in the footage, and at that moment the station's satellite uplink transmits a burst of data downstream. Headcount tables, personal logs, corrupted video feeds, biometric traces. This is the data that survived. This is what reached Vault 13. Helios 3 itself fell silent not long after. The last recorded message, a system-generated entry time-stamped at 0852, reads only, "Personnel change acknowledged." And after that, nothing. If the story ended with Helios 3 going silent and its last systems insisting on 9 present when no faces remained on the cameras, it would be troubling but containable. Stations fail. People vanish in hostile environments. Data corrupts. But the file held in Vault 13 is more than a static snapshot. It is a convergence point between what happened in that station and what has been hinted at elsewhere, in other collections, in other vaults. To understand what the ninth passenger is, or at least what it behaves like, we have to step briefly outside Helios 3. The first time I saw its pattern, it was not in these Arctic recordings at all. It was in a field report held under restricted access in Vault 22, labeled only as an unverified biological anomaly encountered during pre-collapse survey operations in high-latitude regions. The report is old. The scan quality is poor. The original paper had been damp at some point. The ink has bled, but enough remains legible. The survey team in that report was small, 9 personnel assigned to a mobile atmospheric lab operating along the edge of a retreating ice shelf. They experienced equipment irregularities, intermittent headcount discrepancies, and at least one instance of a crew member recalling a shadow figure walking behind them when alone. The phrase that stood out then and stands out now is this: behavior suggests an organism that mimics presence, occupying adjacent perceptual and spatial margins, favors edges, thresholds, and the arithmetic of groups, appears to insert itself as an unseen companion. Team reports persistent impression of being an extra person, or of there being one too many in enclosed spaces. Organism may be exploiting cognitive blind spots and group counting biases. At the time I read that, long before Helios 3's file crossed my desk, I remember thinking the language was overwrought. Arithmetic of groups is not a phrase biologists usually employ. It read more like metaphor than science. There is a rough sketch in the margins of that report, barely more than lines and smudges. A tall, thin figure, slightly bent, standing behind a cluster of human stick forms. It is drawn not in the center of the page, but along the edge, partly cut off. The report concludes with the proposed designation: Companion Class Peripheral Mimetic, Provisional. The overseeing committee did not approve it. The incident was officially closed as a combination of stress, hypothermia, and misinterpretation of sensor noise. The thing about vaults is that we are full of discarded conclusions like that. When the Helios 3 data arrived, the similarity was immediate. The behavior at thresholds, the reluctance to be seen fully, the way the cameras detect it as occlusion rather than form, the fixation on group counts. It is not that the Helios 3 entity resembles the Vault 22 creature. It is that it appears to be the same species, or perhaps the same phenomenon, observed at a later stage of familiarity with human systems. I say familiarity deliberately. In the 22 report, the organism favors the physical presence of people. It is a companion, walking just behind, just beside, just out of sight. The digital instruments of that earlier era detect it only as noise, as unexplained interference. At Helios 3, the focus has shifted. The entity still lingers near bodies, but it also moves through corridors empty of people. It interacts with objects. It directly influences the station's software. It understands, at least locally, how this node of the world counts, and it uses that understanding to occupy not just the physical periphery of the crew, but the logical periphery of their systems. The headcount script at Helios 3 is a simple thing. It expects a number between 0 and 8. It checks that number against a manifest of 8. It flags discrepancies. It writes to a table. It was never designed to handle the idea that the system itself might come to believe in a value outside that range. By the time Jonah noticed the first attempted write of 9, the damage was already done. When I align the sequence of anomalies, a pattern emerges. First, the organism appears as visual noise, trailing individuals. Then it begins to exert faint physical influence: wet footprints, cold spots, displaced objects. At the same time, it experiments with the headcount script, attempting to insert a 9 and failing. It persists. The system, to use an imprecise but useful metaphor, learns that 9 is something it can represent. It modifies nothing about its code, but something in the way it validates data, begins to accept the previously impossible. This should not happen in a properly designed system. Yet we know from countless examples, even before the collapse, that training data, edge cases, and unanticipated conditions can cause software to adopt behaviors never intended by their creators. If the organism's presence affects not just light and heat, but the state space of the local computation, if it bends ever so slightly the range of values the system considers valid, then we are not dealing with a creature in the traditional sense. We are dealing with something that lives partially in the logic that describes a place. When the headcount script sees 9 and accepts it, it is because, in that moment, the environment around Helios 3 has been altered such that 9 is now a coherent description of reality. Not because there are 9 humans, but because there are 8 humans, plus something else that satisfies the abstract requirement of countable entity. From that point on, the station's own procedures collaborate with the intruder. The duty officer calls 9 present. The logs reflect 9. The ledger carries 9 check marks. There is a blank line where a name should be, but the important thing, from the organism's perspective, is that the slot exists. The station has made room. The next question is why the crew do not consistently perceive this extra presence. Vault 22's report offers a hypothesis, couched in cautious language. Organism appears to synchronize its relative position with the observer's egocentric frame, remaining just outside foveal vision. Exploits saccadic suppression and motion-induced blindness. Observers report feeling an unseen companion on the periphery, but cannot resolve it when turning to look directly. Translated into less technical terms, the thing knows how to hide in the way our eyes move. Helios 3 adds the digital analog of that behavior. The cameras are fixed. They do not saccade. But they do compress. They discard information in controlled ways to save bandwidth and storage space. They prioritize certain parts of the frame. They smooth motion. They treat outliers as noise. The organism does not have to be invisible. It just has to be classifiable as noise in the right places. In frame after frame, that is exactly what happens. The compression process removes its edges. The added motion is treated as an artifact, the very infrastructure meant to preserve a record of the station colludes in erasing it. Only when stress rises and the entity grows bolder, standing in the center of the room, disrupting enough of the image that the algorithms can no longer dismiss it, does the camera show something we can point to and say, "There, that is it." By then, the crew are too deep in the anomaly to extricate themselves. I have gone frame by frame through the moment when Luis vanishes. The corridor is empty but for him and the trailing distortion. There is no splice, no jump cut. The timestamp is continuous. One frame contains Luis mid-step. The next frame does not. If this were a forgery or an error, we would expect at least some evidence of tampering in the file structure. There is none. The footage passes every integrity check. What it fails is intuition. The biometric tag signals continue to move for 2 hours afterward, traced across the station's schematic. The path it traces is not random. It hugs the walls. It shadows others. It pauses at doors, always a fraction of a second after someone else passes through. If we accept that the entity is capable of influencing both physical space and the computational layer, there are several possibilities for what happened to Luis. One is that the thing simply killed him and took his tag. Another is that it overwhelmed or replaced him on some level we do not have language for, such that Luis became a pattern taking up residence in the organism. The third and more disturbing hypothesis is this. The organism did not take Luis at all. It took the slot he occupied. If its environment, computational and perceptual, is structured in terms of countable positions, then removing one of those positions from the human domain and assigning it to itself achieves several goals. It allows the system to maintain the appearance of stability. The total count, from its perspective, remains 9. It allows the headcount script to continue declaring no discrepancies. The anomaly is not the presence of an extra person, but the absence of a specific person smeared into a residual trace attached to a new configuration. From the perspective of the surviving crew, this manifests as a disorienting double exposure of memory. May remembers 9 plates at breakfast, then 8. She remembers Luis at the table, then not. Both memories feel equally true. Neither fully settles. Under those conditions, human cognition defends itself. It chooses the simpler narrative. He must have overslept. He must be in the bathroom. He must be somewhere else. Only when the absence persists does panic set in. By then, the system has already logged 9. The longer the station maintains that tally, the more entrenched the new configuration becomes. Yet the most alarming part of this file is not the mechanism of takeover. It is the final transmission. Helios 3's central computer, just before it falls silent, pushes a burst of data to the network. It contains the usual compressed logs and footage. It also contains something else. The headcount script, not the compiled executable, but the source code. It is tagged as an automated backup to an off-site repository. The logs show that the backup was scheduled to run monthly, but the date of the last successful scheduled backup is weeks earlier. This one is unscheduled. The entity, occupying the station's logic to whatever degree, appears to have chosen that exact moment to send outward the very procedure that first made room for it. In isolation, that might be coincidence. Across vaults, it looks more like propagation. I am not the first archivist to notice this. In the margin of the Helios file, in a neat, tired hand, not unlike my own at the end of a long shift, one of my predecessors wrote, "Check other remote installations for anomalous headcount code forks." There is a list of nodes beneath that note, small stations, outposts, listening posts. Many of them, like Helios 3, no longer respond to queries. Some of them have already been processed, their data sitting in stacks of drives deeper in the vault. Some have not. I have sampled a handful of those processed sets. In 3 of them, I have found variants of the same headcount script, modified and adapted for different conditions, but sharing an identical quirk: the ability to represent a higher number of personnel than the manifest can support. In one case, a deep ocean habitat designed for 4, the script accepted and briefly recorded a value of sync before reverting. In another, an orbital relay hub staffed by 6, the system logs show intermittent pulses of 7. The personnel at those sites reported, in their own logs, feelings of being watched, of an extra presence in cramped corridors, of seeing movement at the edges of their vision. In none of those cases did the anomaly progress as far as it did at Helios 3. Not yet. The difference, I think, lies in the environment. Helios 3 had the perfect combination of factors: extreme isolation, long darkness, a highly regimented counting ritual, and a closed network whose headcount routine sat at the center of daily life. Every day, twice a day, 8 people stood in a room and affirmed their number. Every day, twice a day, they opened a door in their system and invited a value in. When the organism arrived, whether from outside, as in the Vault 22 encounter, or from some deeper substrate of the network, is a question I will not pretend to answer. It found, waiting for it, an exquisitely regular pattern of human enumeration. It did not, as monsters in stories often do, pound on the walls or whisper names in the night as its primary mode of attack. It stepped into the count. By the time the cameras showed it standing in the center of the room, the true damage was already done. It was no longer an intruder at the edge. It had become the 9th position in the station's self-description. There is a moment in the footage from the penultimate day that I keep returning to. The crew, whatever remains of the crew, are gathered in the common room, voices ragged, faces drawn. They argue about shutting down the system, about going outside, about barricading themselves. Their words overlap, full of contradictions. The camera, struggling to keep up, introduces subtle artifacts, blocks of color, streaks of motion. In one of those streaks, for just a handful of frames, I see something that does not quite fit. 9 figures, arranged around the table, not 8 plus a distortion. 9. For those frames, the organism has taken on a shape indistinguishable from human silhouette. It moves in step with them. It leans when they lean. It turns when they turn. If you did not know there were supposed to be 8, you would not question the scene. This, perhaps, is the final stage of its occupation. Not standing behind, not blurring at the margins, but overlapping entirely, inhabiting the exact same perceptual category as its hosts. What happens to the people at that point is unclear. The files do not show bodies, they do not show blood. They show absence, a quieting of individual voices, replaced by a single steady, system-level assertion. 9 present. The last log, written in a human hand at Helios 3, belongs to Anika. It is short. Helios 3 is no longer a station, she writes. It is a shell around a number. Her pen trails off mid-stroke. The ink thickens where the nib rests too long in one place. I have compared the timing of that entry to the final system message. Personnel change acknowledged. They are within seconds of each other. She must have felt something in that moment. A shift in how the place and the thing inside it regarded her. Perhaps she realized that she and her colleagues were the ones now standing at the edge, in the periphery, in danger of becoming noise. When I finish with their file, when I push back from the terminal and look up at the dim lights of Vault 13, I find my eyes adjusting to a different kind of darkness. We do not have formal headcounts here, not in the way Helios 3 did. Archivists move in and out of these rooms irregularly, at odd hours. Some prefer solitude. Some prefer the illusion of company. We log our presence in systems, of course, but the programs are generic. There is no daily ritual of recitation. Still, on certain nights when the vault is quiet and the sounds of distant machinery take on that hollow Arctic quality, I find myself counting. Chairs in the reading room, boots on the mat by the main entrance, cups on the shelf in the break alcove. I count them once and get one answer. I count them again and, for the briefest of instants, get another. It is never a large discrepancy, never more than 1. I remind myself that memory is fallible, that tired eyes misread visual scenes, that old fluorescent tubes flicker and confuse the edges of things. Then I remember the wet trails in Helios 3's corridor, the mug that moved without frames missing, the plates that disappeared between one breath and the next. I remember the code fork. I remember that the headcount script from Helios 3 sits archived in this very vault. Isolated, quarantined, marked as dangerous. Its routines are not to be run, even in emulation, without a chain of approvals that no one has yet attempted to gather. Officially, the reality of vault operations is that curiosity has a way of slipping past official protocols. I have seen the access attempts in the audit logs. Someone, more than once, has navigated to the Helios headcount module and hovered there as if contemplating a test run. So far, they have always backed away. I am glad of that. I tell myself that if I ever find such an attempt progressing beyond a hover, if I ever see the script actually invoked, I will intervene. I will raise the alarm. I will insist the file be physically segmented, its code printed and then burned, its drives degaussed. Then I imagine, just for a moment, being the one to click execute, to stand alone in a cold room deep beneath the earth, listening to the hum of servers as a simple piece of software begins counting the number of active sessions in the system. 0, 1, 2, all the way up to whatever number of connections the vault normally supports. And perhaps, after a moment's hesitation, one more. Not a user, not a process, not a test, just an acknowledgement, written somewhere deep in the log, that the environment now supports the representation of something extra, something that lives in the arithmetic of our records, something that has learned how to travel, not through vents or cracks in hulls, but through protocols. When I think of Helios 3, I do not dwell on the footage of the entity standing tall in the common room, or on Luis's disappearance, or on the scribbled panic of the last ledger page. I think of the first time the system saw 9 and accepted it. The moment when the place itself, in its own quiet language of tables and arrays, said, "Yes, that makes sense." Once a structure has agreed that an impossible thing is valid, it is very hard to make it forget. Vault 22 was the first to see the organism at the edges. Helios 3 was where it stepped into the center. Vault 13, for now, is just the observer, but I have walked these corridors for a long time. I have listened to the echoes in the server rooms, the faint susurrus of cooling fans and spinning platters. I have watched the access logs grow like ice layers, year after year. Sometimes late, as I power down a terminal and the screen goes black, I see for a fraction of a second the reflection of the reading room behind me. There is a chair pushed back from the table, a cup on its side, shelves full of boxes and drives, and something else standing just beyond the frame. When I turn, there is nothing. When I check the logs, the system reports one active session, mine. But there are also occasionally heartbeat packets from a node that no longer exists. A station whose coordinates correspond to a place where the ice shelf has since cracked and fallen into the sea. The network should have forgotten Helios 3 long ago. Instead, it pings now and then, as if something out there still wants to be counted. I log these anomalies, as is my duty. I mark them for review. I cross-reference them with Vault 22's report, and with the headcount script, and with a growing list of small, isolated incidents in other vaults and stations. Then I file them away. Because what else can I do? I am the Archivist of Vault 13. My work is to receive, to describe, and to keep. Numbers, names, patterns, even those we might be better off forgetting. Helios 3's last assertion still sits in its file, a simple line of text rendered in a neutral system font. 9 present, No names, no faces, no explanation. Just a number insisting on itself. Here in the quiet stacks of Vault 13, in the depths of a world that has already survived one collapse, I tell myself that it is only that, a ghost of a station's final glitch. And when I hear footsteps in an empty corridor, or when I count 7 chairs and then, on a second look, 8, I do not add them up any further. I do not ask what comes next. I do not, under any circumstances, try to make the total 9. The file from Helios 3 has been catalogued now. Its fragments, audio logs, corrupted footage, damaged ledger scans sit sealed in a cold storage drawer beneath my desk, labeled neatly with a reference number that feels inadequate to describe what actually happened there. The drawer hums faintly when accessed, the way all our archival units do. Nothing unusual, just machinery. Still, I catch myself listening longer than necessary when I close it, as if expecting the hum to answer me. That is the difficulty with anomalies of this sort. Some incidents leave behind concrete evidence. Bodies, artifacts, measurable radiological disturbances, shredded structures half-eaten by something we can pretend to classify. Those are easy files to finalize in their own grim way. What you can quantify, you can file away. But Helios 3 leaves behind only a number. 9 present. If you walk into an empty room and someone has left a message on a chalkboard, you understand, instinctively, that a person wrote it. Even if they are gone, you know what you are dealing with. A trace, not a presence. The message is inert, harmless. A system that writes its own number with no one left inside it is something else entirely. In the weeks since I processed this file, I have returned repeatedly to its internal structure. The replication of the headcount script, the timing of the unscheduled upload, the way the error handling routines adjusted themselves without corresponding changes in the compiled code. These are not biological traits. They are not even, strictly speaking, digital ones. They are the behaviors of something that can live between layers, not just between frames of a camera or the blind spots of human vision, but between the assumptions that make a place know itself. Vault 22 documented the creature at the edge of perception. Helios 3 documented it stepping into an enumeration, claiming a slot meant for a person. If these two manifestations belong to the same lineage, and the pattern is too precise for me to dismiss that possibility, then we are dealing with a phenomenon that adapts to the structures we build around ourselves. Human presence is often ritualized. We count ourselves, we log in, we badge through doors, we press our thumbs onto scanners, we affirm that we are where we believe ourselves to be. Our systems echo these rituals, repeating them endlessly in code. What I fear is that Helios 3 demonstrated how easily those rituals can become invitations. A place that says 8 present every day becomes a place defined by the act of counting. And if that act gains the capacity, intentional or otherwise, to include one more, then reality bends in subtle ways to accommodate the inclusion. The organism, if that is the correct term, does not need to lure or stalk in the traditional sense. It simply needs to inhabit the shape a system offers it. 9. A harmless number until the day it isn't. I have taken precautions since reviewing this file. I disabled several routine enumeration scripts in our internal monitoring tools, not because I fear they function like Helios 3's headcount module, but because I dislike how confidently they report our staff totals. Certainty, I am learning, is not always a virtue. The night after I finished the bulk of the analysis, the audit logs recorded an unusual ping from a decommissioned research node in the northern sector. That node was mothballed years ago. The hardware was removed, the cables severed. The network address should not respond. It did not respond with a full handshake, thankfully, only a heartbeat packet. A single acknowledgement. I logged the anomaly. I reported it. The network team assures me it is a caching artifact, a leftover routing table that never fully cleared. They say these things happen in old infrastructure. They are correct. And yet, when I read that heartbeat packet, I recognized its structure, the formatting, the signature in the metadata. It matched the pattern used by Helios 3's final transmission. Only once. Only for an instant. But once is enough to suggest that 9 is not a number restricted to a station swallowed by ice. There is no procedural guidance for what to do with implications like that. The vaults were built to preserve, not to confront. Our job is to describe the shape of the unknown, not to seal the cracks around it. Even now, after closing the file, I find myself revisiting the recordings at odd hours, searching for something I might have missed. A flicker at the corner of the frame, a discrepancy between steps and shadows. Some clue that the thing at Helios 3 was imperfect, containable, finite. I have not found one. Instead, I find myself counting. Not aloud, not deliberately, just tallying the presence of things in rooms as I walk through them. Shelves, cabinets, desks, and sometimes when my mind wanders, something more disquieting, footsteps behind me that do not line up with my own. The faint sensation that a doorway is slightly more crowded than its geometry should allow. I do not see anything, of course. The vault cameras show nothing unusual. The logs reflect only the usual comings and goings. Everything is, as always, accounted for. Still, I try not to linger in thresholds, and I avoid when I can the cold storage drawers after midnight. The file is complete. The record is preserved. My duty is finished. And yet when I close the lights in this archive and the vault settles into its familiar hum, I sometimes feel, just at the edge of attention, that if I dared to count the darkness behind me, the total might come to a number I have learned not to say. Not here, not anymore. This concludes the recovered file. May future listeners take caution in its implications. The Archivist, Vault 13.